All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started then, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Sounds good to me, if it sounds good to y'all. Well, very cool. Well, the way we've been getting started with most of these Coffee with the Candidates events is we start with a little biography. So, Miss Lori Callais, running for House District 71, I'll turn it over to you for a moment to just tell us a little about yourself.
Well, my name is Lori Callais, and I'm actually from Denham Springs. I was born and raised here. I tell everybody I learned to fish in the Amite River, and I learned to hunt in the woods around my house because my daddy taught me. But I also taught school here. I taught at Denham Springs High School, and I retired from there and then got bored and went back to teaching. And I taught at Walker at the Adult Education Center, and I did that for 10.5 years until 2016. And the flood happened, and when the flood happened, then I needed to take care of my own properties just like everybody else. So
Sure.
That's when I got out of teaching. But I have 3 daughters, and they're not here because they get jobs in other places. But they were born and raised here because I chose to raise my kids here. I love it here. This is home. And let's see, I'm married to Al, my husband. We've been married for 40 years this year.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Congratulations.
So, yes, we toughed it out. I can work out with anybody.
Yeah.
For 40 years, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But he's one of my biggest fans right now. So
Absolutely.
And I guess the only other thing for me that's hard is I'm a brand new grandmother too. I have a 5-month-old grandson.
Well, double congratulations.
And he is in Hawaii right now with my daughter and my son-in-law, who's stationed in Hawaii. He's a Marine.
Yeah.
And he's been serving there for a while. So, but that's me. Oh, and I'm a dog lover. I like dogs.
Well, very good. So the first question that I ask everybody is why the race that you're running for? So why District 71? Because, this election cycle, practically everything's up for grabs. So what makes District 71 seat the sweet spot for you?
Well, for me, my biggest passion is education. And I'm very concerned. And as a teacher, I look at it from a little different angle. I'm looking at it from the classroom perspective. And one of the things that I'm seeing that concerns me greatly is the fact that we're losing our teachers. We're losing our teachers at 10 and 15 years, and we're not losing a few, we're losing a lot. People don't realize that. And so when I really looked at that, and I looked at the education system, and I know that I have a grandson that I want him to be raised here eventually, to go to the schools here, but he needs good teachers. Well, funding doesn't come at the local level. It has to come from the higher level. But as I looked at it, there were other things that I thought we needed to address, and those weren't really good at the local level for me. So as I looked at it, I thought, well, you know what, that's where I need to be. I can make a difference at the state level for the things that I think are important: education, jobs, infrastructure, and mental health care and addiction treatment. Those things are really more at the state level.
Yeah, absolutely.
For funding.
Absolutely, yeah. That sounds like as good a reason as any to me. So, but yeah. My next question is kind of premised on how our Constitution establishes our legislative sessions. So, year over year, it alternates between a general session and a fiscal session. So, what would be your top 2 priorities? One general, one fiscal. Bills that you would love to introduce if you had all the support in the world.
Yeah, if we just had carte blanche.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest with you, I know that you can't go to the legislature and save the world automatically. What you've got to do is work with people, and that's, hey, as a teacher, that's key. I can work with anybody because we have to work with people if you're going to get things done. And as a matter of fact, that's kind of what happened. As I was redoing our properties, I kept listening to the arguments in those sessions, one after the other, and I said, they're not talking to each other. They're acting like children. So I dealt with children, so I think we can look at this and we can try to make a difference because there's no communication. So for me, I know that you go in and you start that process, but you can't go in and say, I'm going to change this and I'm going to change that, because generally that doesn't happen. But you can start with practical, common sense things. For me, one of them is, insurance rates. We can't necessarily, that's going to be a big item, and they tried to do that in this past session, but the bill that they brought was really a bad bill, and it wasn't going to make a difference on our insurance rates. But there are a couple of other things that can be done. For example, most people don't know it, but in Louisiana, if a serviceman or woman is one of our service people is stationed, they're overseas, say they're deployed to Afghanistan or wherever, you don't keep continuous coverage on a car that you're not driving, and you may be there 15, 18 months. It's because the deployments are very long now. When you come back, you haven't had continuous coverage. In the state of Louisiana, you can be charged extra because you served your country. It's legal. Or if your spouse dies, just the fact that your spouse has died can allow the insurance companies to increase your rates. Or if you've paid every bill, you never miss a bill, but your credit rating changes, maybe it drops a little bit, they can also increase your rates. Those are sort of common sense things that I think we need to look at, not just with insurance, but they're everywhere. The things that we do that really affect people, affect my life, affect your life on an everyday basis. And so I think we can start with some of those kinds of things. On the fiscal level, well, I'd like to see if we can begin the process of funding preschool. And I think that there was a bill that was brought this past session. They tried to get it through. It didn't get through. And it was to fund universal pre-K. We know that children, the first 5 years of their lives, the amount of information, the knowledge that they have is unbelievable. And so we need to make sure that we have our children, we teach our children as young as they are. Because we also know that we'll increase our outcomes on graduation if we do this. And we'll increase the graduation rates. You're going to increase successful people. You're going to be for the workforce. You're going to have success.
Yeah.
So I think that needs to be addressed. We also know that if you get pre-K for the children, you increase productivity in their parents because those children have a place to go. So people go, oh, you can't pay for that. Well, you know what? You're losing an awful lot when someone can't work because their child, they can't afford daycare. Some daycares cost as much as colleges today. So why not look at some alternatives? Let's look at some ways that we can invest in Louisiana instead of taking away from it. So I think that's one of the things that I would address.
Yeah. Let's go back to sort of your introduction in your bio. You mentioned your daughters and that they live out of state because opportunities are more plentiful for them out of state. What could you do in the state legislature that would help keep people here? I know when I look back on, say, my high school graduating class, half the people that I was friends with, they live all over the world now. So what would keep people local? What would keep people from having to leave to pursue other opportunities?
Well, the most interesting thing to me is that we leave, our children do leave, and they get educated here and they go. But they generally want to come home because we have such wonderful people, wonderful culture, wonderful food. This is home. And my daughters would like to come home.
Yeah.
But we have to provide the opportunities for them here, and that means jobs. And that's a big order. It's not just done by snapping your fingers. I wish it were. We have to make sure that we provide a good educated workforce that will then attract the jobs that we need. Because we have to head into this 21st century. It's going to be tech. It's the things that we haven't addressed as well, and I think that we can do that. And frankly, my daughters can be paid more in other states than they can be in Louisiana. By virtue of the fact that you're a woman in Louisiana, it is legal to pay you less if you do the same exact job as a man. So they can get jobs in other states where they are paid, for their work because they're doing the same work as someone else is. And that's something I think needs to be addressed as far as women go.
Sure. You mentioned jobs, of course. So, typically whenever I hear the word jobs, I think of big business, and I think of, I always think of the state trying to attract some big corporation to come in. So I'm a small business owner. We're here in my store. What sort of policies could you implement that would help support kind of a culture of entrepreneurship with those sorts of folks as well, to make sure that when they're getting out of high school, when they're getting out of college, instead of having to go off for fortune and fame, they can do it themselves. They can do it right here
to start their own businesses.
Yeah,
you're an entrepreneur and you want to do something. You want to be in a climate that's going to support that. That's going to look at you and say, you know what, you're not going to have to do let's do it this way, regulation after regulation after regulation. You know,
Mhm.
you're not going to have to do all the things that discourage you. Most people don't realize when they get into business that there's a lot to it, and you're not going to be a success overnight without a lot of hard work. But the state can come about and do some common sense things about, again, the regulations that we do, the licenses that we require. You in Louisiana are required to get a license if you braid hair, or if you were a florist. You know, I can understand it if you were dealing with chemicals or something that could hurt somebody, but I've yet to see a flower attack anybody. That's the kind of frivolous things that we're doing. So we can stop with some of that and basically some common sense things. I have to tell you too, John, my husband and I have owned small businesses, pretty much the entire time we've been married. We've been married a long time. So yeah, I get it. Yeah, for a few, just a few. And we know we've had to deal with that too. And I think that can be, some of those are just burdensome, or maybe they need to be streamlined. But look at our small businesses, because people forget. In our state, we do backflips for our big industries. And I get it, they bring in jobs. It's not bad. But we don't do anything for our small businesses. And if you want to see the heartbeat of Louisiana, you go to the small business people, because they're hiring lots of people. But they're doing more than that. They're bringing people in. They rejuvenate a community. Look at what happens in Denham Springs. All the entrepreneurs we have here just in the antique district. And every one of those antique stores has small little booths with people who are working there. And you know, that's free enterprise at its best.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to encourage that. And you know, when you talk to small business owners, you find out that it's really tough. You know,
Right.
we're talking about the inventory tax and how that all works. Well, maybe we can look at some things like that. I don't know all the answers, but I'm willing to look and find ways. Because again, if you talk to the business owners, not the special interest groups, but just go talk to everyday business owners, and find out where the problems are at.
Right. Well, let's talk about the biggest issue on everyone's minds, drainage. I don't even need to say anything else, just drainage. You can go from there.
Yeah. Well, as I go and I knock on doors, you hear the same story over and over again. The thing that I noticed, though, is that they'll be saying the same things. Their issues are pretty much the same. They'll be using the same language, and I'm thinking, but the person over there just said the same thing, and you don't even know that person over there. Or the person on this side, way over here, is doing the same thing. And that's a lack of knowledge. So if you look at it from the state perspective, what can we do at the state level? So I've been, you know, and by the way, I lost property too in the flood when Barry was going to barrel down on us. I just knew we were going to lose everything at that moment too, just like everybody else. So yeah, it's a concern. But I think what we can do, and it's at the state level, right now we have technology. Everything's on databases everywhere. But I went to find out exactly what was going on in Livingston Parish. Did you know I couldn't find anywhere online? I could find the interactive flood maps. I did find those.
Sure.
Very interesting, very helpful. But it was, okay, we got $62 million in money for projects, flood projects for the mitigation after this flood. Well, what's being done at this moment? Why is that one being spent there? I got a list off of, I think it was WBRZ. That's where I found the comprehensive list. And I sat down with somebody, and we went through that list about what this means. Well, you know, knowledge is power.
Sure.
And transparency would be really good too. Because if we can see what's going on, we can understand it. We can also hold people accountable. So what I think we need to do is at the state level is to maybe have a database that just as a constituent, just as a person who lives in Louisiana, I can go to and find out what's going on in my own parish and any other parish. We forget in 2016 there were 2 floods. There was one here, and that happened in August, but there was another one that had happened up in North Louisiana. So flooding is pretty, you know, all over the state. So as a state, that needs to be addressed, because we need to tell people what's going on. We don't need to hide it, because when we hide it, you know, first of all, we don't know what's going on. But secondly, that opens the invitation for things that, you know, shouldn't happen. Open it up. Let us see. Nothing to hide.
Right.
So I think communication would start. Because again, there's differences that you can do on the parish and the state level.
Sure. So yeah, so communication, organizing information,
Absolutely.
and transparency. another issue that along the same lines of infrastructure that I know everyone could see how it could benefit from those sorts of solutions as well is our infrastructure backlog, just with roads and bridges and all that good stuff. There's been a lot of talk about increasing the gas tax. Where would you stand on?
Well, first of all, I think the problem we get on any tax in the state of Louisiana is that we don't trust any of the lawmakers to do what they say. I mean, we've voted for taxes before, and you think, well, it's going to take care of, say, education, or we, voted on things, and that was going to do that. And then when you turn around, well, it didn't take care of that. It took care of something else. Maybe it plugged a hole in a budget that we didn't know about, and so it's a trust factor. As a matter of fact, there was a bill that came before 2017 that would have raised the gas tax. However, it was vetoed. And part of the reasons, there were many, but one of the reasons was that actually the people who would know, like the people in the Department of Transportation or the scientists or whoever works on these things and says this is a priority, 1, 2, 3, 4, they didn't necessarily have to be listened to. Instead, you could, maybe I can get this project for my district. It may not be the priority, but I get it for my district. So we have to have that accountability there too, that says, this road is being used by the most amount of people, and it's terrible. Although I think most roads in Louisiana have issues. I've found that if you are asleep in a car and you hit you come from Mississippi or you come from Texas, you will immediately wake up because you were in Louisiana. Now, how we can change from literally cross the state line and get a bad road is amazing. We've always prided ourselves as being Mississippi's always below us. Well, not in that situation. So I think we need to address that. And as far as the gas tax goes, the first thing we're going to have to do, and I mean, we get what we pay for, but at the same time, they're not paying the right things when we give it to them. And I think it's a trust factor right now.
Yeah, and that was something that kept coming up at the Chamber Forum the other day. It was across parties and across candidates, something that everyone sort of acknowledged is that there is sort of a lack of trust in government and a lack of trust of if we're taxed, how are those taxes going to be spent? So what can you do as a state representative that could help instill? So we've talked about transparency. That's obviously a big sort of thing. Are there any other things that you could do to sort of take it to the people and
absolutely
make people trust government?
One of the things, it goes right back to that, is letting people know what's going on. You shouldn't have to go to the internet to find out what's, in other words, on Facebook to find out what's going on in your whole parish or in the structure, the infrastructure. Instead, as a legislator, that's what I'll do. I'll have a site. This is what's being passed. This is what's going on. And by the way, this is what it means, because doublespeak is really good in the legislature. So I think we need to do that. I think, too, that we've got to make sure that when we say, okay, here's a tax, we're going to pass this tax, that we dedicate it. It can't be used for anything else. You tie it up in this little bow because it can't be touched. It can't be used for anything else. But until we start doing those things, there will be no trust. But again, it's letting people know what's going on.
Sure.
And I know as a legislator, that's what I intend to do. When you go up to the legislature and you start listening to the things that are being talked about, I always thought that they were really smart people. And I'm not saying there are some really smart people.
Yeah.
There's some I wondered how they put their shoes on in the morning because it scared me.
Sure.
And it's a matter of priorities too. So if we as a legislative body will address what's actually needed and make it a priority, we have the highest maternal mortality rate in the nation. I mean, women die in giving birth here.
Yeah.
But this session, that wasn't, it wasn't even in there. They didn't even talk about that. What can we do to improve outcomes? What can we do to save the lives of the mothers and the children? That wasn't addressed, but there was a huge discussion about cauliflower rice, that it should be called rice cauliflower, not cauliflower rice. And I just kept going, I know that cauliflower is not rice, and I suspect everybody else knows that cauliflower is not rice. But there was a huge, on the floor and everything, 45 minutes on the floor. And then it was in committee. It's that kind of thing that people look at and go, this is crazy.
Yeah.
So it's maintaining priorities, but I think it's just letting people know what's going on.
Sure. So you mentioned kind of making sure that the funds are dedicated with different taxes to making sure that they're going to what they're intended for. That's kind of one of the sort of issues that's going on with folks that are trying to call for a new constitutional convention. There are a lot of dedicated funds in the state constitution that can't be touched, and it seems, every other election we're voting on new amendments. And so there are some folks calling for a new constitutional convention. At the Chamber Forum the other day, you mentioned that you don't necessarily oppose it, but you just question some motivation. And so I'm curious to know sort of what are the circumstances that you would support it, and what are kind of some of the circumstances where you would oppose a call for a new constitutional
Well, I don't
convention?
think we should just say, here's the Constitution, let's go change it.
Mhm.
I mean, I actually remember in 73 when the last Constitutional Convention was, and it was, I can just remember reading the newspapers and talking about it in school, and it was a big deal, and it's really hard work, and it takes a long time if you do it right. But my concern is I'm looking at the groups that really want to change our Constitution. And there are sacred cows in that Constitution. We need to look at it. We've legislated everything except education and health care. That's it. They got to pull from those because all of the other stuff is in there. You can't touch it. Back up on something. When I say dedicate, if you put a new tax in,
Sure.
I think that should be dedicated because people need to know what they're paying for. If it's going to the general fund, then fine. We all know it's going to the general fund. That's used to pay for all of our needs. However, if it's for roads, then that's what it's supposed to go to. Then it goes for roads, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The problem we have with the Constitutional Convention, it really is looking at the groups that are calling for this. Almost all of them are special interest groups. They're lobbyists. I mean, I can see it coming right now because it comes up every year, the discussion about, funding our retirement plans, the pension plans for teachers and for firemen and for policemen. I could see them going after that, and I'll fight them left and right for that because those people have worked hard for that, and they're counting on that. And, when people start messing with that, they're messing with people's lives. They're affecting. So I think we need to look exactly what that you want to address. And who's behind all of that. So if we know these things will be addressed, it's a limited constitutional convention. I think you're going to know what you need to do, you'll be able to handle it, and you won't waste taxpayers' money. Because if it's a free-for-all, you can forget it. That's going to be a nightmare. And then things will be addressed. Something else that needs to be done is legislatures often dodge the ball. They will, here's the amendment, y'all vote on it, instead of actually go ahead, making the amendment, voting on it themselves, taking care of the bills rather than amendments. And when you get it, we literally can't govern ourselves if we don't know what we're voting for. Yeah. And it's written in doublespeak. I mean, double negatives, which make a positive, or triple negative, which makes it double negatives, positive, we're going to do the negative.
Right.
You read these things and you can't understand it. I have a question. Why can't we just do something as simple as, I know this, people look at me and say I'm corny about this, but it's my background as a teacher. We post those things outside of all of the polling places. Well, let's say if you vote something in the simple, maybe 6th grade level, reading level, and say, if you vote yes for this, this is what happens. If you vote no for this, this is what's happened. The last time that we had 9 amendments, I sat down with 6 other people. Took us 2 hours to figure out exactly what they were talking about. How can we as a people govern ourselves when we don't even know what we're voting on? And special interests are defining it for us.
Sure.
And they're going to define it in their way. So that's why we end up with a Constitution that is just riddled with stuff that you can't even understand.
Right. Yeah, I understand completely what you mean. It's with all the double and triple negatives, it's like you have to have a degree in mathematics to understand English.
That's right. And I taught English for a long time, and I'm telling you, we could not figure those things out. We did, but it took a lot of discussion.
Right. Well, in the event that a constitutional convention would be called, who would you support as being the delegates to the constitutional convention? Do you think it should be the legislators? Do you think it should be elected delegates by the people? Do you think there should be appointees? How do you think that should be handled?
Well, I've got to give that a little bit of thought. But if
Sure.
I remember right, in the last one, they were the legislators. Yeah, I think so.
Huh.
And it was crazy. But at the same time, if I'm being elected to represent the people, I think that I need to represent the people. Again, the issue comes in with All right, who's behind those elections, maybe, shall we say?
Sure.
What special interest groups are really pushing that? And by the way, you can figure that one out. You just go look at people's ethics reports to find out who's paying for what.
Right.
And remember that you get beholden to these people. And I tell everybody I'm unbossed and unbeholden. I'm taking care of this. I'm a grassroots campaign. I'm doing this myself because someone asked me. They said, "You need to go talk to this lobbying group." And I said, "I can't." They said, "Why not?" I said, "Because when I get that money, then they're going to expect me to vote a certain way, and I refuse to."
Sure.
I think that we need to look at all sides of the fence. The thing that amazes me, it would be a constitutional convention too, is that we all want it our way. And if you're a Republican, you want it your way, and if you're a Democrat, you want it your way. And the amazing thing is there's probably really good ideas on both sides. But you know what? They're not all good ideas. It's when we put those ideas together that we actually have what America's founded on. It's compromise. It's not a bad word. It makes sense. And that's kind of where we are at the Constitutional Convention. So
Sure. Yeah, and that's actually been one of my favorite things about doing this event series is, I'm speaking to Democrats, speaking to Republicans, Libertarians, different, different ideologies on the spectrum there. And everybody has good ideas, everybody has bad ideas, and it's really about trying to work through those together.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something we've lost. As a teacher, for me, every child that walked in the room, and I've actually lived my life this way, I didn't care. I don't care what their political party was. I didn't care what their religious affiliation was. All I did was take that child from where they were and bring them to where they needed to be. And I taught high school, by the way.
Yeah.
And I've actually done that in my life. If you ask me right now what most of the parties that my friends are, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
I've never asked them because that didn't matter. It was how this person was to me in my life and our friendships, because politics just shouldn't enter into that.
Right.
And I think that what we've forgotten is if we can all start with at least one point of agreement, and we can all find something we can agree on, and then we can go from there. We're not going to agree with everything everyone says, but we can start with a point of agreement and then build from that. And right now, all I see is people doing this, and they won't listen. It's scoring brownie points for whatever side they're on, and I'm not into brownies.
Yeah. Well, I've got one more biggie,
Sure.
and then a fun one.
Okay.
So the last biggie is 2020 census coming up, which means we'll be doing redistricting, which means the folks that are elected to the legislature right now will be in charge of that.
That's right.
What are your thoughts on keeping it fair, keeping the districts representative of the folks that make them up?
Well, one of the things we need to remember that the voters need to elect the politicians. The politicians should not elect the voters, and that's what happens in gerrymandering. And too many people fought and died in our country for that right to vote. That was a huge concept in our Revolutionary War. That had never been done before. To have a representative democracy, which is what we have. And so for me, that vote is sacred. Every single vote should count. So to do that, I think we need to have an independent commission. Someone that's not, they don't care. I mean, there's technology now that actually can help us do that so that we have equal districts, but that they're not bizarre. I mean, and there's another aspect that we forget. I know everybody looks at it from a partisan issue, but it's also from a representation issue. If you look at, for example, our congressional sixth, which starts, I think, up at Central, and it goes all the way down into the, like Fouche or Terrebonne or one of those parishes. Well, that's a lot. And the issues that we have here in Livingston Parish may not be the same as you're going to have in Terrebonne.
Sure.
So how can you be a good representative if you've got just these bizarre districts? So I think we need to definitely do them in a fair manner so every single vote counts, and that everybody gets to have a say in how our government runs. And I think that's going to have to be done with an independent commission, because let's face it, people are in their corners right now, and I don't want anybody in the corner when it comes to me in the voting booth.
Right.
I just want to be in there, and I want my vote to count.
Perfect. Well, last question I have for you comes off of the Cavalier House Books job application. Give me 2 books that have most influenced your life, one fiction and one nonfiction.
Okay. Well, the English teacher in me is going to tell you it was Kill a Mockingbird. I taught that for many, many years, and I taught it because of the lesson that it teaches. And it's not just innocent. There's a powerful message in that book. And so I taught that for many years. And for me, the first time I read that, it really affected some of my views in life. It changed me, actually, with some of the things that I did. It made me look at my own self. Now, as far as the nonfiction, I'm kind of strange on that one. I actually like the autobiography, Ben Franklin's autobiography. Ben had some wonderful ideas, amazing ideas. Just a little bit dry, but he was an amazing man. And so I actually read that and have remembered so much of that and actually applied some of his lessons to my life. If anybody wants to get themselves organized, I mean organized, to the minute, go read that autobiography, because Ben did it. He was very successful, and he had basically 3 parts to his life. You know, he was a printer, and then after that part of his life, he became an inventor, because he retired. And back in that day, he actually retired, became an inventor, and then after that, he became a statesman.
Right.
And yet, he used his time wisely.
Yeah.
Throughout the whole thing. So I just think that was my mom.
Absolutely. He had it all figured out, and if you didn't believe him, all you had to do was ask him.
That's right.
He'd tell you all about it.
He was very much that. And but I just find him very fascinating. So that was one of the ones that I've enjoyed reading.
Great. Yeah, those are 2 books that I've also enjoyed.
Yes.
Have you read Go Set a Watchman?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that one caused a great stir because, you know, addicts changed in that book.
Yeah.
But to me, it actually was very indicative of the South at the time, and it was truly a daughter waking up and realizing that this idealistic hero that she had was actually just a human being who had his flaws. And so, yes, it was a bit rough in the reading, but I actually enjoyed Go Set a Watchman.
I did too, yeah. My wife and I were split on that one. I really enjoyed it because you can kind of see the evolution of the ideas and the evolution of the writing. And I thought that was fun to kind of pick apart.
It was, and she had some really funny segments in there that I have to tell you, I laughed a lot. It was some really funny stories, but yeah, you could see that.
Well, fantastic. Well, I thank you so much for coming and having coffee with us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, we'll turn you loose if anybody has any questions for you. So thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.